I had already buried my husband once. Not his body. They never found enough of Miles Corbett to give me that mercy. I buried his toothbrush, his half-finished crossword, the navy sweater that still smelled like his cedar soap until one day it didn't. I buried the future we had planned in tiny pieces because everyone kept telling me the same thing. Alden, you have to accept that he's gone. 3 years later, I had finally learned how to wake up without reaching across the bed. I could make coffee for one without crying. I could even say, my husband died, without my voice breaking every time. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in a city 200 miles from home, I looked across a crowded street and saw Miles alive. And he was holding a little boy's hand. I'm Alden Shaw, 31, book conservator, professional rescuer of things everyone else has given up on. Water-damaged manuscripts. Cracked leather bindings. Letters burned black around the edges. Give me patience, Japanese tissue, wheat paste, and enough time, and I can make something fragile survive another 100 years. People find that poetic when they learn I'm a widower. I don't. That afternoon, I was in Bellwether for work, carrying a restored 19th century journal back to a private collection. It should have been simple. Deliver the journal. Sign the paperwork. Catch the 6:10 train home. Instead, I stopped outside a bakery because the man across the street tilted his head when a little boy said something to him. My heart forgot how to beat. No, grief does strange things. I knew that. I had seen Miles in grocery stores, airports, even once in the reflection of a darkened bus window. Never his face. Always a shoulder, a laugh, a familiar coat. Your brain gets cruel when it misses someone badly enough. So I told myself not to look again. I looked again. The man crouched beside the boy and retied his sneaker. He double-knotted it. Miles always double-knotted everything. Then the boy reached for him, and the man took his hand without hesitation. I crossed the street before I consciously decided to move. A horn sounded somewhere to my left. Someone cursed at me. None of it mattered. The man stood. Sunlight caught the faint scar beneath his chin. I knew that scar. I had kissed that scar on our wedding morning because Miles had nicked himself shaving and complained it would ruin every photograph. My paper bag slipped lower in my fingers. Miles, I tried to say. Nothing came out. Another man stepped from the bakery carrying 3 drinks. Tall, composed, maybe mid-30s. He handed one to Miles, then reached up and casually straightened his collar. Darling, we're going to be late. Darling. One word. That was all it took. 3 years of grief rearranged themselves inside me. Miles wasn't dead. Miles was here. He had someone. There was a child holding his hand. For one terrible second, the explanation seemed obvious. He had left. Maybe the accident had given him the perfect disappearance. Maybe every night I had sat awake waiting for rescue teams to call. He had already been building this. A new city, a new man, a new family, a life with no Alden in it. I should have walked away. Instead, I whispered, Miles. This time he heard me. He turned. The change was immediate. The easy expression vanished from his face. The drink slipped in his hand, coffee spilling over the lid. He stared at me as though I had stepped out of a nightmare he had spent years trying to remember. Then he did something worse than looking guilty. He looked terrified. The little boy tugged his sleeve. Miles. But Miles didn't answer him. He took one step toward me. His free hand rose to his chest, as if something underneath his ribs hurt. Do I? His voice broke. He swallowed. Do I know you? I think that question hurt more than being told he was dead. I held up my left hand. My wedding band caught the afternoon light. You should. His eyes dropped to the ring. His face went pale. The other man moved closer, concerned, but Miles lifted a hand, stopping him without ever looking away from me. That was the first thing Miles did that changed everything. He chose to come toward me. One step, then another. Not toward the man who had called him darling. Toward me. What's your name? He asked. I almost laughed. Almost cried. Alden Shaw. The instant I said it, Miles flinched. His eyes squeezed shut. A broken image seemed to pass across his face, recognition without understanding. His fingers trembled. Then he whispered my first name like it had been waiting somewhere inside him for years. Alden. I couldn't breathe. How long? I asked. How long have you been alive? Miles opened his eyes. There was no deception in them now. Only fear, confusion, and something dangerously close to hope. 3 years, he said quietly. The world tilted beneath me. Then why didn't you come home? He stared at my wedding ring again. and when he answered, his voice was barely audible. Because I don't know where home is. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Miles looked past me and noticed what I had not. People were staring. A woman outside the bakery had raised her phone. Two men near the corner were whispering his name. Miles Corbett, apparently, was not invisible in Bellwether. Not here, he said. His voice changed instantly, controlled and precise. The voice of a man accustomed to being listened to. He turned to the man beside him. Theo, could you take Jamie to the museum? I need some time. Theo studied me, then Miles. Are you sure? No, Miles admitted. But I need to do this. Theo nodded. No argument. No territorial performance. He took Jamie's hand and left. Miles guided me toward a quiet hotel cafe across the street, and I noticed 3 different people greet him on the way inside. One called him Mr. Corbett and thanked him for saving the Hawthorne redevelopment. Another asked whether he would still speak at some Architecture Foundation dinner. Miles answered politely without slowing down. The husband I remembered had been talented. The man standing beside me had apparently become important. That should have made him feel more distant. Instead, when we sat down, he quietly moved the water glass closer to me because my hands were shaking too badly to reach it. Drink, he said. I stared at him. You used to say that. Miles froze. What? Whenever I got overwhelmed. You never told me to calm down. You gave me water because you knew I hated being told to calm down. Something flickered across his face. He pushed the glass another inch toward me. Then apparently I had one good instinct. I almost smiled. That frightened me more than anything. I took off my wedding ring and placed it between us. Miles stared at it as if it might explain him. We were married for 4 years, I said. Together for 7. 3 years ago, you drove north for a site inspection during the storms. Your car was found downstream 2 days later. They searched for weeks. My throat tightened. Everyone told me there was no realistic chance you survived. Miles did not interrupt. We held a memorial because there was nothing to bury. Your mother cried into my coat. Your coworkers sent flowers. I kept paying your phone bill for 11 months because disconnecting it felt like killing you myself. His eyes closed. Alden, do not apologize yet. My voice came sharper than I intended. I need the truth before I can survive your apology. Miles nodded once. Fair. Then he gave it to me. He had been found almost 40 miles from the wreck, unconscious, without his wallet or phone. Weeks disappeared into hospitals. Months disappeared into rehabilitation. His memory before the accident was shattered into sensations without names. Cedar soap. A yellow kitchen. Rain against bedroom windows. A man laughing somewhere behind him. I did not even know Miles was my name, he said. They identified me eventually through an old professional photograph, but by then the missing person search connected to the crash had been closed in another jurisdiction. My identification gave me facts. It did not give me a life I recognized. But you had my name somewhere. No, our marriage license. Tax records. Emergency contacts. Eventually, yes. His jaw tightened. But by the time I was capable of managing any of that myself, records had been transferred, accounts had been closed, and I was terrified of discovering a life full of people I could not remember. There it was. Not an excuse. A failure. Human and ugly. So you stopped looking. Miles looked directly at me. For a while, yes. I hated how much the honesty mattered. Then I started again. He reached for his phone, but stopped before touching it. I searched missing person. Archives. Accident reports. Old photographs. I hired a records specialist last year. I had fragments, Alden. A kitchen window. Blue ink on someone's fingers. The smell of old paper. I thought they might be invented memories. My breath caught. Blue ink. I looked down at my right hand. A faint stain still marked the side of my middle finger from the journal I had repaired that morning. Miles saw it too. His face changed. That. He leaned forward, then stopped himself. May I? I did not know what he meant until he slowly offered his hand, palm up, leaving the distance between us for me to decide. I should have refused. Instead, I placed my ink-stained fingers against his palm. Miles inhaled sharply. His thumb moved once across my knuckle, gentle and automatic. My chest hurt. You used to clean ink off my hands, I whispered. You complained every time. Did it work? Never. A small laugh escaped him. Mine followed before I could stop it. For one impossible second, we were not a widower and a stranger. We were two men sharing an old joke neither of us fully remembered. Then Miles released my hand first. That mattered too. I cannot ask you to forgive me, he said. And I will not pretend memory loss erases what those 3 years did to you. He looked toward my ring on the table. But I want to know what happened to us. Not from documents. From you. I swallowed. I am supposed to leave at 6:10. Stay until tomorrow. The powerful architect bellwether seemed to know disappeared from his posture. What remained was simply Miles, frightened and trying not to show it. I will book another room at my hotel. Separate floor if you want. I will pay for the train change, or I will stay out of every practical decision entirely. Just give me 1 day. Why? His eyes found mine. Because when you started walking away outside, I felt something I have not felt since the accident. What? Panic. He glanced at my ink-stained fingers. Not because I remembered losing you. His voice softened. Because somehow I knew I was about to lose you again. I picked up my wedding ring. For 3 years, it had meant there was nobody left to choose me. I slid it back onto my finger and looked at the man who had forgotten almost everything except, apparently, the fear of watching me leave. One day, I said. Miles exhaled like I had just returned something precious. One day, I took out my phone, canceled the 6:10 train, and for the first time in 3 years, changed my plans because of my husband. By 9 the next morning, I had learned that Miles Corbett could command a room full of architects with 3 words and still somehow forget that normal people needed breakfast. He had asked me to meet him at the Bellwether Preservation Center because he had a morning review he could not cancel. I arrived expecting to wait in a lobby. Instead, Miles met me at the elevator himself. A young assistant hurried behind him, listing calls, permits, and donor meetings. Move the foundation call to noon, Miles said. Mr. Corbett, they specifically requested 9:30. Then they can specifically request noon. He looked at me. Have you eaten? I blinked. That is what you interrupted a foundation call to ask. So no. 10 minutes later, there was coffee and a blueberry muffin waiting beside me in the conference room. Miles acted as though this were completely ordinary. Everyone else acted as though the building had started floating. I understood why when the meeting began. Miles was not loud. He did not need to be. 12 people stopped talking when he entered. He reviewed plans for the restoration of an old railway terminal with an efficiency that made the man I remembered feel both familiar and strangely distant. Then someone placed a 19th century ledger on the table as a decorative reference for the project. A consultant flipped it open carelessly, pressing the spine flat. Please do not do that, I said. Silence. The consultant looked at me, then at my inexpensive jacket. Excuse me. I immediately regretted speaking. The binding is failing. If you force it flat, you will separate the text block from the spine. He smiled politely in the way people do when they have already decided you are irrelevant. It belongs to the center. I think we can manage. He is right, Miles said. The room changed. The consultant released the book. Miles did not simply defend me. He turned the ledger toward me. Show us. My pulse jumped. Miles, this is your meeting. And you know something we do not. So I showed them. I pointed out the cracked sewing supports, the old adhesive, the faint tide line from water exposure. I explained that the damage was reparable, but only if nobody tried to make the book behave like something new. Old materials have memory, I said. You work with what survived. You do not punish them for failing to return to their original shape. I realized what I had said 1 second too late. Miles was staring at me, not at the ledger. At me. Nobody spoke. Then he looked toward the project director. Have Mr. Shaw assess the archive before anything is displayed. I nearly dropped my coffee. I am leaving tomorrow. Then we have today. The consultant started to object about budget approval. Miles cut him off with a calm glance. I will cover the assessment personally if necessary. That was when I understood something uncomfortable. Miles was not merely successful here. He had weight, money, reputation, authority. People rearranged schedules when he spoke. Yet he had used that authority not to rescue me, but to make everyone else stop long enough to hear me. After the meeting, I found him standing beside the tall windows, loosening his tie. You did not have to do that. Do what? Turn me into the most terrifying person in a preservation meeting. His mouth twitched. You were already terrifying. I just gave you the floor. I laughed. He watched me with that same startled expression from yesterday. What? I asked. Nothing. Miles. He looked embarrassed. Miles Corbett, apparently feared by half the building, looked embarrassed because I had caught him staring. Your laugh, he said. I knew what it was going to sound like before you did it. My chest tightened. Later, While I examined the archive, I caught him rubbing his thumb against the side of his index finger. He used to do that when he was anxious. You are hovering, I said. I am observing. You hated when people hovered over your drafting table. He immediately stepped back. Better. Marginally. An hour. Later, my shoulders had tightened from bending over documents. Without asking, Miles placed a bottle of water beside my elbow. Then he set a wrapped turkey sandwich next to it. I looked up. Again. You forget to eat when you work. He froze. So did I. Did someone tell you that? I asked. No, his voice became quieter. I just knew. Something inside me shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the hard wall I had built around every memory developed its first crack. That afternoon, Miles drove me back to my hotel himself. At a red light, his phone illuminated in the cup holder. I did not mean to look, but the message preview caught my eye. It was from a record specialist. New Jersey archive search complete. No match for the man from the kitchen sketches. Miles turned the phone face down. Kitchen sketches? I asked. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. Something I have been drawing since the hospital. A kitchen. And pieces of someone. The light turned green, but Miles did not move until the car behind us honked. When we reached my hotel, I opened the door, then heard him say my name. Not uncertainly this time. Alden. I turned. Miles looked more frightened than he had in the boardroom, and somehow more certain. Come to my apartment tonight. I went still. He quickly added, there is something I need to show you. Something I started drawing before I knew you existed. I should have said no. Yesterday, Miles had been a dead man standing across a street. This morning, he had been a stranger wearing my husband's face. But now he had remembered my laugh before hearing it, remembered that I forgot meals, and looked at my ink-stained hands as though they belonged to a dream he had been trying to reach. I closed the car door again. What time? Miles exhaled slowly. 7. For the first time since seeing him alive, I was not following Miles because I needed an explanation. I was following because I was beginning to believe he might have been searching for me too. At 7 exactly, I stood outside Miles Corbett's apartment wondering whether I was about to find proof that my husband had remembered me or proof that there was no place left for me in his life. Theo answered the door. That was not how I had imagined the evening beginning. Miles is upstairs, he said. Jamie forgot his science project. He stepped aside, and I saw a model solar system on the dining table, a child's jacket over a chair, and 3 framed photographs on a shelf. Miles with Jamie at a baseball game. Miles beside Theo at a charity dinner. Miles smiling in a life I had never seen. My stomach dropped. Theo noticed. Those pictures are not what you think. I am getting tired of people telling me what I think. Fair. He picked up the cardboard solar system. Then asked me. Before I could, Miles came down the stairs. He had changed out of his suit, but his expression sharpened when he saw us facing each other. Theo. One word. Warning, not anger. Theo sighed. I was not attacking him. Miles came directly to my side anyway. Not between us. Beside me. That distinction mattered. Alden came because I invited him. I know. Theo looked at me. And you deserve context before you see another photograph and assume Miles secretly built a replacement family. The sentence landed hard because that was exactly what I had done. Theo explained simply. He had met Miles during rehabilitation through a hospital design project. Friendship came first. Jamie adored Miles. Only a few months ago, Theo and Miles had tried turning that friendship into something more. Tried? I asked. Theo gave a humorless smile. Miles is very good at showing up when someone needs him. That is not the same thing as letting someone in. Miles went still. Theo. He should know. I decide what Alden should know about me. The room cooled instantly. I had seen Miles silence executives with that tone that morning. But then he looked at me, and it disappeared. Unless you want to ask. There it was again. Everyone else got certainty. I got a choice. Were you together? I asked. Miles answered before Theo could. We were trying to be. It hurt. I hated that it hurt. And yesterday he called you darling. Yes. Did you love him? Silence. Theo looked away first. Miles did not. No, the answer was quiet, not cruel. And I should have admitted that sooner. Theo nodded once. That is why I came tonight. We already had this conversation after you left the cafe. My chest tightened. Because of me? Because of the truth, Miles said. Meeting you did not create the problem. It made it impossible for me to keep ignoring it. Theo lifted Jamie's project. At the door he paused. For what it is worth. Alden. He used to wake up saying things he could not explain. Yellow curtains, old books, blue ink. He looked at Miles. I thought he was dreaming about a place. I think he was dreaming about a person. Then he left. The apartment became painfully quiet. You did not have to end something because I appeared, I said. I did not. Miles leaned against the table. I ended it because Theo deserves someone who chooses him without hesitation. His eyes met mine. And apparently hesitation has been the only honest thing I have given him. I looked at the photographs again. I saw you with Jamie yesterday and thought he was yours. Miles understood immediately. You thought I had a son. I thought you had everything. My voice thinned despite my best effort. Everything we were supposed to have, except me. Miles crossed half the distance between us, then stopped. He did not touch me. Alden, look at me. I did. You were not replaced. The words were simple. They nearly broke me. You cannot know that. I can know what my life feels like. His voice softened. It has been functional, successful, sometimes even happy, but there has always been a room in it I could not enter. He glanced toward the stairs. Come upstairs. His home office was immaculate except for one wall. Sketches covered it. Dozens of them. A sunlit kitchen window. The corner of a worn wooden table. Fingers stained dark at the tips. The curve of a man's shoulder bent over an open book. My breath stopped. Miles. I started these during rehabilitation. He pulled open a drawer. More pages. Dates stretched across 3 years. I thought if I drew the fragments enough times, eventually they would become a map. I reached for one sheet, then froze. The hand on the page had a small crooked scar beside the thumb. I looked at my own hand. Same scar. Miles looked from the drawing to me, and something in his face gave way. I drew that 18 months ago. I could not speak. He stepped closer, slowly enough that I could move away. I did not. Yesterday you asked why I never came home, he said. I still owe you more answers than I have. His eyes moved to my ink-stained fingers. But I need you to know something before you decide what happens next. What? Miles looked at the wall covered with pieces of me. I did not know your name. Alden. His voice trembled once. But I think I have been trying to find you for 3 years. The drawings should have made everything easier. Instead, they made one thing impossible to ignore. Miles had dated every page. The first sketch of my hand was 18 months old, but the records specialist had messaged him about New Jersey that afternoon. I looked from the dates to Miles. When did you start searching for me? His expression changed. Alden, that is not an answer. I hated how quickly warmth could become fear. Yesterday, I had believed Miles could not find me. Tonight, I was standing inside proof that he had known there was someone to find. When, seriously searching, he asked quietly. About a year ago. The answer hit harder than I expected. You woke up 3 years ago. Yes. So there were 2 years when you did not look. Miles did not defend himself. That almost made it worse. I looked at first, he said. Not well. I had fragments, medical bills, an identification that felt like it belonged to someone else. Every search led to another piece of a life I could not recognize. Including me? He went silent. There it was. Something still did not fit. Then his phone rang downstairs. He ignored it. It rang again. And again. Finally, Miles answered. Not tonight. A man's voice spoke rapidly through the speaker. I caught only a few words. Corbett Studio. Board. Press. Legal confirmation. Miles turned away from me. I said tomorrow. He ended the call. What legal confirmation? I asked. Miles closed his eyes. They verified my original identity this afternoon. And they found the marriage record. I stared at him. You already knew? Since 4:30. My stomach dropped. You sat with me for hours and did not tell me that someone had legally confirmed I am your husband. I was going to. When? After I looked at enough drawings to trust you? No, Miles stepped toward me. I stepped back. He stopped immediately. Alden, I needed to understand what that confirmation would do before I put it on you. What it would do to me. My laugh came out wrong. Miles, I held a memorial for you. I spent 3 years wondering whether you were cold somewhere, whether you were afraid, whether I should have somehow known you were alive. You do not get to decide which truth I can handle. His face tightened. You are right. No excuse. No polished architect voice. Just that. Then tell me all of it. Miles looked at the wall of sketches. When I was first identified, people from my old professional life contacted me. Firms, attorneys, former colleagues. They gave me documents, photographs, addresses. Your name was there. The room seemed to lose its air. You knew my name. I saw it. That is not different. To me it was. His voice cracked. Alden Shaw was a name beside the word spouse. I looked at it and felt nothing because my brain could not connect it to you. I was terrified that if I contacted you, I would become a stranger you were obligated to care for. Anger burned behind my eyes. So you chose for me? Yes. The honesty landed like a stone. Miles looked down, and it was cowardly. He told me the rest. His architecture firm had kept part of his ownership protected while his legal status remained unresolved. When he recovered enough to work, he rebuilt his career in Bellwether under the same name, but avoided reopening the personal records attached to his old life. Success made hiding easier. Meetings, buildings, awards, a schedule so full he never had to ask why an empty kitchen in his dreams felt more real than his apartment. Then the drawings became clearer, he said. The ink, the books, your hand. I hired the specialist because I finally understood I was not afraid of finding nothing. His eyes met mine. I was afraid of finding someone who had loved me and discovering I had already hurt him beyond repair. My anger did not disappear. That was the worst part. I understood him, and I was still furious. You did hurt me. I know. You could have called. I know. You could have given me the choice. I know. His voice dropped. And if I could give those years back to you, I would. I looked at the drawings again. For minutes, they had felt romantic. Now they felt like evidence of two lonely men separated partly by tragedy and partly by fear. I reached for my coat. Miles did not stop me. Where are you going? My hotel. Alden, please. I turned at the door. He looked nothing like the man who could move a foundation meeting with one sentence. Yesterday I thought you abandoned me because you wanted another life, I said. Then I started believing you never had a way home. Now I know you found the address and were too afraid to knock. His eyes filled with something raw. That is fair. No, it is terrible. I opened the door. But it is honest. Miles nodded slowly. I stepped into the hallway, then heard him behind me. What happens now? I looked back at the husband I had mourned, the stranger I had started trusting, and the frightened man who had finally stopped protecting himself with silence. Now you do not tell me who we used to be, I said. And I do not promise to forgive you because we have a marriage certificate. Miles went still. Then what do we do? I swallowed. If there is anything left between us, you meet me as the man you are now. For the first time that night, hope appeared in his face. I hated that I felt it too. And Alden? What? No more hidden truths. I held his gaze. That is the only reason there gets to be a next time. Then I walked away, leaving Miles surrounded by 3 years of drawings and one chance he would have to choose whether he was brave enough to use. The next morning, Miles did not send flowers. He did not send an apology long enough to make himself feel better. At 8:12, one message appeared on my phone. I canceled everything today. If you want space, I will give it to you. If you want answers, I will answer anything. No more deciding for you. I stared at those words until my coffee went cold. At 10, rain started hammering Bellwether hard enough to blur the hotel windows. I was packing when the preservation center called. The archive room had developed a ceiling leak, and several boxes I had assessed yesterday were at risk. 20 minutes later, I was running through the center with my sleeves rolled up, moving damp materials while staff scrambled for plastic sheeting. I did not call Miles. Somehow he came anyway. He walked into the archive carrying waterproof storage bins, his expensive coat soaked dark at the shoulders. What are you doing here? I asked. The center called my firm because we manage the restoration. You have people for this. So do you? He looked at the box in my arms. Yet here you are. That was annoyingly difficult to argue with. For the next 2 hours, Miles followed my instructions without trying to take control. The man who could silence a boardroom stood beside me labeling wet folders because I told him labels mattered. When a staff member suggested discarding a damaged collection, Miles simply said, Mr. Shaw says it can be saved. We save it. Not because I was his husband. Not because he felt guilty. Because he trusted what I knew. By noon, my hands were shaking from cold and exhaustion. Miles noticed before I did. A dry coat settled over my shoulders. His. I am fine. You are shivering. That does not make you right about everything. I am learning that. He handed me hot coffee and, importantly, did not tell me how to drink it. I almost smiled. You remembered. No orders when Alden is overwhelmed. His mouth softened. I am building a new list. Something in my chest loosened. We sat on the floor outside the archive while rain tapped against the high windows. Miles looked exhausted now that nobody important was watching. Why did you become so good at being alone? I asked. He stared into his coffee. Because everyone needed me to be recovered. I waited. My firm needed an architect. Attorneys needed signatures. Doctors needed progress. People congratulated me when I returned to work because success looked like proof that I was fine. He rubbed his thumb against his finger. Nobody knew what to do when I said I could design a 30-story building, but could not remember who taught me to make pancakes. I did. Miles looked at me. You were terrible at them. Was I? Catastrophic. A laugh escaped him, then faded. That is what scared me about finding you. What if you looked at me and saw a defective version of your husband? I wanted to answer quickly. I did not. He deserved something truer. Part of me did. Miles flinched, but he stayed. Yesterday especially, I continued. I wanted you to be exactly who you were, because then maybe the last 3 years would stop feeling real. I looked at my hands. That was not fair either. You lost someone. So did you. The words surprised both of us. Miles lowered his head. For the first time, I understood that while I had lost one man, Miles had awakened to discover he had lost everyone, including himself. Understanding did not erase what he had hidden, but anger finally had somewhere to sit beside my chest. When the rain eased, Miles offered to drive me back. Halfway to the hotel, I noticed he was taking the long route. Are you kidnapping me? Very inefficiently. Miles. He glanced over. I did not want the drive to end. The honesty was so unpolished that I had no defense against it. At the hotel entrance, neither of us moved. Then Miles held out his hand between us. Palm up, the same way he had at the cafe. An invitation, not an assumption. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed gently. No memory returned. No dramatic revelation arrived. We simply sat there holding hands while rain slid down the windshield, and somehow that felt more dangerous than remembering. This does not mean I have forgiven everything, I said. I know. And it does not mean we are suddenly married again in every way that matters. I know that too. His thumb brushed once over my knuckle. Then why are you smiling? Because you are still holding my hand. I looked down. So was he. My phone buzzed before I could answer. An email notification filled the screen from the legal office handling Miles's restored identity. Formal identity confirmation completed. Spousal status requires immediate review. Miles saw it. The warmth disappeared from his face. Alden. I slowly released his hand. What does immediate review mean? Miles stared at the message, then at me. It means tomorrow people are going to start asking whether our marriage still exists. I looked at the space between our hands. Yesterday that question would have terrified me because I did not know whether Miles wanted me. Today it terrified me for the opposite reason. For the first time, I was beginning to want the answer too. The legal review was scheduled for 10 the next morning at the Bellwether Civic Center, which sounded harmless until I arrived and found reporters outside. Miles was not merely an architect anymore. His return to his original legal identity affected his firm ownership, old contracts, insurance records, and apparently enough money to make strangers interested in whether his supposedly dead marriage still existed. I stopped near the entrance. You did not mention cameras. Miles looked genuinely irritated. Because there were not supposed to be cameras. His attorney hurried toward us, pale and apologetic. Someone leaked the filing. Then a reporter called my name. Not Miles's. Mine. Mr. Shaw, did you know restoring your marriage could give you access to Mr. Corbett's ownership stake? My stomach dropped. Another voice followed. Did you travel to Bellwether specifically after learning how much he was worth? No, the answer came out too softly. Cameras moved closer. Miles stepped in front of me without touching me, blocking half the questions with his body. Inside, he said. The word was cold enough that people actually listened. For 3 seconds, I felt protected. Then we entered the hearing room and discovered the real damage waiting on the table. Copies of financial documents had been distributed to the attorneys and 2 members of Corbett Studios' board. One page was highlighted in yellow. It showed that if Miles's legal death declaration was reversed and our marriage recognized as continuous, I could potentially regain spousal rights connected to assets that had grown dramatically during the last 3 years. One board member, Grant Ellison, looked at me as though I had walked in carrying a shovel for buried treasure. This is an extraordinary coincidence, he said. Miles's jaw tightened. Choose your next sentence carefully. Grant did. That made it worse. Mr. Shaw appears in Bellwether, spends 48 hours privately with you, and immediately afterward your attorneys reopen a marital status worth millions of dollars. I did not reopen anything, I said. The identity confirmation triggered the review. Grant slid another sheet forward. A photograph. Me leaving Miles's apartment 2 nights ago. Another showed us sitting in his car yesterday, our hands joined between us. My face burned. Someone followed us. Miles went completely still. His attorney leaned close and whispered something to him. Miles did not answer. Grant continued. We also have an email Mr. Shaw sent 3 years ago. I recognized it immediately. It was addressed to Miles's old firm after the search had ended. I had asked whether there were unpaid compensation benefits, life insurance documents, or personal accounts I needed to close. One sentence had been enlarged and stripped from everything around it. I need to know what I am legally entitled to as his surviving spouse. Someone behind me whispered, there it is. My humiliation became anger. Read the rest. Grant raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. Read the next sentence. He did not. So I did from memory. I cannot keep receiving bills in his name because every envelope makes me think someone found him. Silence. I was not asking how to get rich. I was trying to close his cell phone account without having a breakdown in a customer service department. A few people looked uncomfortable. Grant did not. Nevertheless, your financial interest is undeniable. Miles finally spoke. Enough. But his attorney caught his arm and whispered again. I heard the words fiduciary exposure and public statement. Miles looked at the documents, then at the board, then at me. I waited for him to say what he had said at the Preservation Center. Alden knows what he is doing. Listen to him. Trust him. Instead, Miles said nothing. 1 second. 3. 5. It was not long, but grief has its own clock. In that silence, I was back at the memorial listening to people explain why hope was foolish. I was back outside the bakery believing Miles had chosen another life. I was back in his apartment learning that fear had kept him from contacting me. I had given him one condition. No more hidden truths. Now everyone in the room was deciding who I was, and Miles was letting them. Alden, he finally said. I stood. Do not. His face changed. I need a minute to understand where these documents came from. Of course. My voice sounded remarkably calm. You need more information. That is not what I mean. It is always information with you, Miles. Records. Proof. Time to think. I looked at the photograph of our hands. Something private and tentative had been turned into evidence against me. I thought yesterday meant you trusted me. I do. Then I wish it had sounded like it. I walked toward the door. Miles started after me, but his attorney stopped him with a document. Miles, we just found the source of the leak. I almost turned around. Almost. Then Grant said behind me, if Mr. Shaw leaves now, perhaps that answers the question. I stopped with my hand on the door. Every part of me wanted Miles to answer him, to say my name, to choose me when it cost something. Nothing came. I opened the door and stepped into a hallway full of cameras. Questions hit immediately. Gold digger. Marriage claim. Millions. I kept walking until I reached the stairwell, where nobody could see me press both hands against my face. 3 years ago, I had lost my husband. Yesterday, I had begun to believe I might find him again. But standing alone in that stairwell, I realized the thing I was most afraid of losing was no longer the man Miles used to be. It was the trust one had just started building with the man he had become. And upstairs, behind a closed door, Miles Corbett had exactly one chance left to decide whether his silence was going to cost him me twice. I had made it halfway down the Civic Center steps when every reporter's phone started buzzing at once. Someone behind me called my name, but I kept walking. Then the glass doors opened, and the crowd went strangely quiet. Alden. Miles. I stopped. He stood at the top of the steps without his attorney beside him, without a board member speaking for him, without the careful distance he usually kept between his private life and everyone else. Grant Ellison came through the doors behind him. Miles, do not make a statement until counsel approves it. Miles did not even turn around. You have given enough advice for one morning. That stopped Grant. Miles descended the steps until he was standing beside me. Not in front of me this time. Beside me. Cameras lifted. Mr. Corbett, is Mr. Shaw attempting to claim your assets? Someone shouted. Miles looked toward the reporter. No. Then why did he contact your firm about financial benefits after your disappearance? Because someone gave you one sentence from an email and hoped you would never read the rest. Miles raised a folder. I did. Grant's face changed. Miles noticed. My attorney traced the leaked documents through their digital access records. The files distributed this morning were downloaded yesterday from a board account assigned to Grant Ellison. The murmuring started immediately. Grant stepped forward. I accessed company records because your restored identity creates a fiduciary problem. You accessed them, Miles said calmly. Then someone using your credentials sent cropped versions to the press at 11:43 last night. Grant's confidence faltered. That proves nothing. It proves more when combined with your email to the board arguing that recognition of my marriage could dilute the voting leverage you gained while my ownership was legally inactive. Silence. There it was. Not hatred. Not random cruelty. Money and control. Grant had benefited from Miles remaining legally disconnected from his old life. My return threatened that arrangement. You made Alden look opportunistic because his existence was inconvenient to you, Miles said. You turned photographs taken without our permission into evidence. You removed context from a grieving spouse's email. And you did it because you thought humiliating him would make me afraid to restore what you might lose. Grant looked toward the cameras and finally seemed to understand that the audience he had invited was now watching him. This is a corporate matter. Not anymore. Miles handed the folder to his attorney, who had followed him outside. Effective immediately, I am requesting Grant's suspension from the board pending the independent ethics investigation already authorized by counsel. Grant stared at him. You cannot be serious. I have rarely been more serious. Then Miles did something that frightened me more than all of it. He turned toward me. Alden, I owe you an apology, but not here. His voice was steady. What I owe you here is the truth. The cameras moved closer. 3 years ago, this man lost his husband. He dealt with hospitals, insurers, bills, legal forms, and a memorial without a body. The email being used against him was written while he was trying to survive that. Miles glanced at my ink-stained fingers. He restores things people assume are beyond saving. Yesterday, I watched him spend hours protecting an archive that was not even his responsibility, because walking away from something damaged is simply not who he is. My throat tightened. Miles, he continued, but his voice softened only for me. And when he found me, he did not ask for money. He did not ask about my firm. He did not even ask me to come home. He asked why I had not come back. Nobody spoke. The legal review can determine property. Attorneys can determine contracts. But nobody in that building gets to determine Alden's value to me. A reporter called. Then what is he to you now? Miles looked at me. For one terrible second, I remembered his silence upstairs. This time there was none. His name is Alden Shaw, he said. He is my husband. My breath caught. Legally, someone asked. Miles's jaw tightened. That question is exactly the problem. I am not standing beside him because a certificate requires it. He reached toward me, then stopped with his hand open between us. He let me choose. I stared at his palm. 3 years of grief had taught me to believe love was something that could disappear without permission. The last 3 days had taught me something harder. Being loved did not mean being rescued. It meant being seen, clearly, and still being given a choice. I put my hand in his. Miles closed his fingers around mine. Cameras flashed. I failed him once because I was afraid to face what my past might ask of me, Miles said. I will not fail him again because other people find our truth inconvenient. Grant disappeared back through the doors with 2 attorneys following him. His own leak had created the investigation that would cost him the authority he had tried to protect. But I barely noticed. Miles was still holding my hand. You could lose board support over this, I whispered. Possibly. Your reputation. It has survived worse. Miles. He finally smiled, small and nervous, and nothing like the man who had just dismantled Grant in front of half the city. I spent 3 years building a life because I was afraid of discovering what I had lost. I am done letting fear make my decisions. Something inside me finally released. Not every hurt. Not every unanswered question. But the loneliness. I was no longer standing alone while other people decided what my grief meant. I squeezed his hand. I am still angry with you. I know. Calling me your husband in front of cameras does not magically fix us. I know that too. Good. His thumb moved across my knuckle. Alden, what? When this is over, would you let me take you somewhere without attorneys, reporters, or legal documents? I looked at him. Are you asking your own husband on a date? I think I am. For the first time since finding him, I smiled without grief immediately following it. Ask me again when nobody is watching. Miles looked around at the cameras, almost amused. Then I suppose I finally have something worth waiting for. 3 months later, Miles asked me on our first date for the 4th time. The first 3 times I said no. Not because I wanted to punish him. Because I had spent 3 years letting grief decide what happened next, and I refused to let hope do the same thing. Miles accepted every answer. He stopped trying to recover our old marriage like it was one of my damaged books. Instead, he started showing up for the life in front of us. He came to my conservation studio on Fridays and learned. That archival paste was not glue. I visited Bellwether twice a month and discovered that Miles still forgot lunch whenever a design problem annoyed him. We attended counseling. We finished the legal review. Grant resigned from the board after the independent investigation confirmed he had leaked confidential records to protect his voting influence. Miles never celebrated that part. He simply closed the file and came home to make terrible pancakes. Most importantly, he stopped hiding when he was afraid. One night, he called me at 2:17 in the morning after waking from a memory he could not place. He did not pretend he was fine. He said, "I need you." So I stayed on the phone until sunrise. That was when I understood something. Miles was not becoming my old husband again. I was falling in love with the man who had survived him. On the 4th invitation, I said yes. 6 months after I first saw him in Bellwether, Miles took me back to the same bakery. "You have a disturbing sense of romance," I told him. "I considered the Civic Center. I would have left you there." Noted. He bought coffee. I bought 2 pastries because apparently emotional growth did not make Miles better at feeding himself. We walked outside into bright afternoon sunlight. The street looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe terrible memories always do once you survive what comes after them. A little boy came running from the corner. Miles. Jamie nearly collided with him. Theo followed at a more reasonable speed, smiling. There was no awkwardness now. Theo had become exactly what he should have been allowed to remain, Miles's friend. Jamie proudly showed us a model bridge he had built for school. Miles crouched to inspect it with ridiculous seriousness. "Structurally questionable," he announced. "Rude," Jamie said. "I am 7. I laughed. Miles looked up. He still did that sometimes. Looked at me as though my laughter had arrived before the memory of it. Theo and Jamie left for the museum, and Miles stood beside me watching them disappear into the crowd. Then he reached into his coat. My stomach tightened when I saw the small box. "Absolutely not," I said. Miles blinked. "You have not even seen what is inside. If you propose to the man you are already legally married to in the exact place where he discovered you were alive, I will walk into traffic out of principle." Miles laughed. "You have gotten meaner." "Therapy." He opened the box. Inside was my old wedding ring. Not the one I wore. His. The ring recovered years ago from the belongings eventually connected to the accident. It had been scratched and slightly bent. "I had it repaired," he said. "I touched the damaged edge. You left the mark." I remembered something you said about restoration. My throat tightened. "You work with what survived. You do not punish it for failing to return to its original shape." Miles took the ring but did not put it on. "I am not asking you to recreate our marriage." His voice softened. "I cannot promise I will remember everything. There are still years that feel like photographs from someone else's life." He looked directly at me. "But I know you now." That mattered more than I expected. "I know you forget breakfast when you are nervous. I know you pretend not to cry at dog adoption commercials. I know you need silence after a bad day before you are ready to talk. I know you are stronger than everyone who kept treating you like grief made you fragile." His fingers closed around the ring. "And I know that when I had the freedom to choose what came next, I chose you." My eyes burned. That sounded suspiciously like a proposal. "Then reject it." He held out the ring. "You get to decide." That was the difference. In the beginning, everyone had decided for me. The rescuers decided Miles was gone. Grief decided I had to survive him. Miles once decided I was better without a stranger returning to my life. Even strangers had tried to decide what my love was worth. Now nobody was deciding except me. I took the ring. One condition. Anything. We do not go backward. Miles nodded. "Never. We build something new. Together." I slid the ring onto his finger. It fit. Not perfectly. Neither did we. Across the street was the exact place where I had once watched Miles holding Jamie's hand while another man called him darling, and I had believed I was looking at. Proof that my place in his life was gone. Miles seemed to realize it at the same moment. He extended his hand toward me, palm open. "You coming, darling?" I laughed through tears and put my hand in his. This time there was no little boy between us, no stranger beside him, no crowd deciding what the image meant. Just Miles and me, walking toward a future neither of us remembered because we had never lived it before. For 3 years, I thought the miracle would have been getting my husband back. I was wrong. The miracle was that Miles got an entire life to choose again, and when he finally knew exactly who I was, he still reached for my hand.